Hello and a very warm welcome once again. What we have on the panel is a diverse set of people who represent the best and the brightest of work that is being done when it comes to green energy. The format for the session, I know Raj CHENGAPPA was supposed to also be here, but we've tweaked that a bit. What I want to do is to get Dr. Mathur to first sort of set the context for this in a short opening keynote. And subsequently, we will get on with our panel discussion. As you can see, some of the biggest names in this space, technology pioneers, and actual people who are implementing projects on the ground who know what the reality is. Dr. Mathur, I'm going to start with you. You want to do it here? Yeah, you can go ahead.
Siddharth, friends, it's a pleasure to be here and especially to address a topic which is very close to my heart on how to bring India and Japan ever closer together. This is an important issue. Many years ago, we tried very hard to see how we could replicate the amazingly successful project that was carried out at one of the cement plants with a heat recovery unit which had been designed and manufactured in Japan. The unit worked and worked spectacularly. It worked so well that we at the Bureau of Energy Efficiency said that we could actually increase the energy efficiency requirements from cement plants, and they could achieve it simply by adopting this. So we did so. Well, of the 27 plants which could adopt this technology, 23 did. But all of them got it from a third country. Why? And that was the issue of price. So one of the learnings that I came away with was that there is a huge advantage as far as the design is concerned, as far as the manufacturing lines is concerned, as far as manufacturing management is concerned. That's as far as Japan is concerned. However, the issue remains one of creating manufacturing costs which users are willing and able to pay. As we look to tomorrow, we are looking at a number of technologies where Japan clearly is the front runner, particularly hydrogen, green hydrogen. Japan is the first country in the world to adopt a hydrogen strategy. There are over 162 hydrogen refueling stations, when the vast amount of the world is still grappling with the issue of how do we do electricity recharging stations. This is expected to expand further. We also see that as far as residential stationary fuel cells are concerned, over 300,000 units have already been installed in and across Japan. To manufacture the hydrogen that is required, there are something like somewhere near 20 electrolysis plants which already have been set in place. And the largest one is, if I'm not wrong, located in Fukushima, was the largest capacity installation at the time when it was set up, which was, I think, it is just when the pandemic lockdown started, somewhere around the beginning of 2020. We also note that not only is this a product of Japanese research and development, but that there are a number of Japanese companies, many of who are represented here, for fuel cells, Panasonic, Toyota and Honda for fuel cell vehicles, Mitsubishi for hydrogen power generation technologies, Asahi Kasei for electrolyzers, who have actually implemented these technologies. So not only is it available, it is available commercially. This suggests that there are a huge range of technologies that are already available. We also look at the research work that is occurring in the area of photocatalysis and look at that as an area where in the future we will start seeing a lot of development. I mentioned the issue of heat recovery in industry, but heat recovery, what is known as the ground-based heat recovery systems, that's something else in which Japan has taken a lead. And amongst the geothermal technologies, particularly the lower temperature geothermal turbines are concerned, again, we see that Japan has taken lead in this area. I would like to combine this with the kind of manufacturing expertise, the manufacturing management systems, which we all greatly value and greatly want to emulate that have been put in place. This is part of Japanese culture. I look at the concept of motainai and believe that the spirit of appreciating things and maximizing one's resources is inbuilt into the Japanese psyche. This has, in my view, helped in the huge energy efficiency growth that we have seen over the past many decades. Apart from photocatalysis, we see now that there is a huge bet that has been placed as far as R&D is concerned on solid-state batteries. This would be a momentous change, particularly if we can get long-life solid-state batteries. This would greatly address the kind of electrolyzer and heat management issues that we have with things like lithium-ion batteries and so on. But let us therefore look at these kinds of opportunities that occur. I'm greatly heartened by the fact that the number of battery technology patents that are filed every year in Japan is far, far, far more than any other country that we see in the world. In my area, the solar technology area, we see balance of systems, particularly inverters, as being something that, again, has been developed and are used globally. Today, I counted 6 amongst the top 10 companies that hold solar PV patents being from Japan. My colleagues will also talk about carbon recycling, but the fact that we can think of using gas and recycling or actually capturing the carbon dioxide that is produced and storing it, sequestering it, is again, the set of technologies that can be used for this is something that Japan has invested a huge bit. However, Japan also has a problem that it is heavily reliant on energy imports, largely because of the land availability issues that Japan faces. What this implies is that whether it is we are talking of electric vehicles, whether we are talking of energy conservation, whether we are talking of the development of solar PVs and wind energy, or of green hydrogen and associated green ammonia, these are all areas in which Japan has been taking a lead. I would like to point out that at the same time, can we have the next slide, please? That at the same time, we also see a lot of manufacturing initiatives which have been taken by various Indian companies. And as a result, they are often seen as the lowest cost manufacturers in the world. This, to me, represents a certain complementarity. And what is this complementarity? This complementarity could be in a number of areas. Next, please. We notice that the photovoltaic manufacturing that occurred in Japan is now, in a sense, not competitive as far as cost is concerned, but semiconductor production is. Therefore, semiconductor technology is something that is worth looking at collaborations in the future. Similarly, batteries and inverters, solar cooling technologies, green hydrogen, including the manufacture of electrolyzers, electric vehicles, and I would suggest trucks in particular, as well as solar mini-grids. Solar mini-grid is something I've not spoken about, but this is one of the most active areas of collaboration between Japan and India. There are at least 3 Indian companies who are today very active in the solar mini-grid business, and one of them has already a huge amount of Japanese investment in their equity position. What all of this suggests is that there is, therefore, a potential for collaboration between Japan and India. Next slide, please. Japan has excelled in new designs, new manufacturing configurations, and new management techniques. But it gets locked out of international markets because of the high manufacturing costs. PV modules is but an example of this. I started today by talking of the heat recovery systems, which is, in my own experience, a resultant of this area of, in a sense, both complementarity as well as of mismatch. This suggests that what has worked well is that the design of the product and of the manufacturing lines in Japan and manufacturing in India for the Indian market and for other developing countries makes great sense. In the subsequent sessions, we will have Mr. Bhargav from Maruti Suzuki who will be with us. We will have Mr. Java from Daikin India who will be with us. Both of them talk of the fact how they have captured the Indian market. In the case of Suzuki, 50% of the Indian car market is today in the hands of the Suzuki Group, with designs that are made in Japan and the manufacturing is done in this country. This, in a sense, is where we are looking for direct investment or possibly joint ventures, as the Maruti Suzuki initially started as, for manufacturing Japanese designed products and for implementing the famed Japanese systems for manufacturing. These help in providing made-for-purpose products, whether solar semiconductors or solar mini-grids and everything in between, that people are willing and able to pay for. This approach would be further strengthened in the years ahead as the demographic trends in the two countries strengthen, creating a network of design bureaus on the one side and manufacturing facilities that complement those design bureaus on the other side. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur, for that last slide particularly, which sets me thinking. One of the finest and most well-known examples of Indo-Japan manufacturing is Maruti Suzuki. And the market share that you spoke about, it was even higher in the years in the past. And that gives us a template for green energy. Manufacturing in India, Japanese design, Japanese technology, and definitely Japanese funding, which has been pretty liberal and generous, and in various other sectors. What I want to do now in the time that we have is to go around the panel and get them to speak about this, taking off from here. Mr. Ito, I'm going to come to you first and really ask you to elaborate briefly on the potential when it comes to hydrogen. And the reason I'm asking you is what Dr. Mathur told us about the way Japan is leading in hydrogen. We made a good start with electric vehicles, and in a session earlier today before lunch, one of the panelists informed us about the fact that there are waiting periods for electric scooters, something that shouldn't have been there. Given that, what is the potential for hydrogen-led development in India? Mr. Ito.
Okay, firstly, thank you very much for giving us these opportunities. My name is Ito of the Toshiba, India. Okay, hydrogen, so you are talking. So as in such a presentation, maybe energy storage is a key technology to India, because in India, renewable energy is increasing. So coal-fired, unfortunately, cannot increase in this time. So that means maybe renewable energy will be increased, and also the total ratio of the renewable energy also increase. But the problem is renewable energy is uncontrolled energies. So in order to stabilize total grid, so if renewable energy ratio will be around more than 50%, in such a case, how to stabilize? This is almost also important. So in such a case, so for example, almost energy is, so that means that in order to, every time surplus energy, is daytime many surplus energy from the PV. So some technology have to storage such energies. So there's three types of key technologies for such energy storage. One is a battery, and the second is a pumped storage hydro, and the third is hydrogen. Hydrogen also shift electricity to the other energies, so like the hydrogen. So in this case, in Toshiba is maybe very unique company to have such a three key technologies. So that means that we can contribute to the Indian society in future, maybe after 5 or 10 years. So hydrogen is an important technology, but problem is maybe now cost is increase in how to show the economical. Well, this is also in Japan also discussing. We can have such a technology, and we can supply such a technologies, but unfortunately currently manufacturing cost is very high, expensive. So this is firstly. Toshiba is now in maybe, for example, Fukushima. So Fukushima, we already installed the Fukushima hydrogen plant. Toshiba is a role of the main coordinator of such a plant. But this is using the alkali type of the electrolyzer. Alkali and PEM is one of the very kind of the technologies. Maybe not only the Japanese, also in Korean, Chinese, Indian also can do such a technologies. Now in the Toshiba considers some advanced technology called solid oxide electrolyzer. Yeah. So that's that we are just developing such technologies. But it takes time because high efficient by using the heat. So very high efficient technologies. But maybe only 1 or 2 companies just now developing. So Toshiba is involved because currently that competing with Chinese or Indian is very difficult. So then we can take. So in order to merge the hydrogen society, otherwise, so that hydrogen supply chain is completed. Otherwise, it is difficult to show the competitiveness or economical seat.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Kapil, I'm coming to you, and the point that I really want you to expand on in terms of the fact that you have technologies available in Japan, and I was pleasantly surprised by the kind of hydrogen-led work that's happening there. What is the potential as far as India is concerned, and how do you yourselves see the ability to work with global partners?
See, first we need to understand, at this moment, whatever we consume or produce in India is all grey hydrogen. So, but that is around 8 to 10% of the global market even right now. So we are in market of around 5 to 6 million metric tons even right now. With the evolvement and possibly more industries which will now go to net zero or ambitions to decarbonize. Green hydrogen could be a main enabler because there will be sectors which doesn't have the ability to just have the decarbonization goals to be achieved by changing in their electricity patterns. So those hard to abate sectors are the one which would definitely require adoption of green hydrogen for that matter. Coming back to India and technology partnership with countries like Japan, I would say yes, Japan is far ahead in terms of usage of hydrogen in mobility application. They are far ahead compared to any other nation globally, for that matter. But we would see those usage would largely be possibly in long-haul vehicles, so trucks or buses here in India, whereas possibly the major usage of green hydrogen from an use case basis would be in industrial feedstock and fuel.
And we already have some pilot project of a bus that's happening.
Yes, a bus,
in
you
Nagpur.
have...
Yeah,
You have hydrogen stations which are being put up in Assam to Leh Ladakh. You have hydrogen buses running. You have hydrogen cars also now being used by our own bureaucrats. So, and of course some of them are from Japan. So I would say there is a good ecosystem what is possibly coming in India. And it's an opportunity which lies, if you see both the sites on India and Japan, which is very complementary in nature. Now I'll tell you why this is complementary, because Japan could be a little ahead in the technology curve. And possibly, when we are talking green hydrogen, it's nothing new from an electrochemistry perspective.
Right.
Electrolyzers have been in existence. Production of hydrogen through electrolyzers have been in existence for decades now. So nothing new. What we are talking now is how do we bring down the cost? How do we scale up the efficiencies? And
Right.
how do we make sure that we are able to make use of that?
Bharat, taking that point forward, and also for our audience to understand, we are still on the way when it comes to electric mobility and green power replacing our dependence on thermal, and now hydrogen, green hydrogen. How significant is the potential that we have as a country?
Hello. Yeah. So, Siddharth, before I come to that question, let me just address a little bit on this hydrogen story, since that's really the flavor of the season currently. I think there is no doubt that that Japan is way ahead in terms of the technology, both on the electrolyzer side, on the green hydrogen side, and also on the fuel cell side. And I think the government in Japan has taken some major initiatives, like setting up the New Energy Development NEDO organization, which basically supports any new initiatives. I think there is some $2 trillion fund which has been set aside for green energies. And this year alone, I believe about 6,000 crores has been set aside by Japan for investment in hydrogen and fuel cells. In the Indian scenario, I think we are still a little bit behind. Of course, we have an energy policy which is beginning to come up now. This month, I think there should be another part of the policy which should be announced. What I see, one of the big challenges in the hydrogen space in India is, it's like a chicken and egg story. So the hydrogen producers, they feel there is no demand for hydrogen. And on the other hand, those who are looking, who are thinking of, like me, who are thinking of developing fuel cells, we see there is no hydrogen, there is no green hydrogen. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg story. And I think the one way to solve it is to set up these, zero emission valleys or zero emission areas in the country. And that is something that Japan and India can perhaps do very well together, to establish clear zones where there is a zero emission valley through the technology that the Japanese bring and being deployed here in India. The other aspect on the same subject is that, we are a large country, but we talk about, 10 buses being put on hydrogen or, heavy duty vehicle. I think it's totally out of whack, out of focus. I mean, we need to be talking about 10,000 buses, right? And that's where we would get the Japanese and the rest of
But
the world.
won't cost be an issue for that?
So it's a great point. I mean, let's talk about ammonia itself. You know, ammonia has always been traded in stock price, on stock prices, you know, on the spot, you take a decision. But if we have to talk about green ammonia, someone wants to set up a plant, he needs a proper 10-year visibility on what is the buying price going to be. You know, some kind of a power purchase agreement or some kind of an agreement on the long-term sense. And I look back at the time when the Indian Railways decided to buy 1,000, 12,000 horsepower locomotives. Very different from buying 10 locomotives. We brought the price down dramatically. I was in the Alstom at those days. We brought the price down drastically to a price which was comparable to what Indian Railways were able to produce, with all the, you know, without factoring the cost of the factory, blah, blah, etc. So I think as a nation, if we want to move fast on the hydrogen fuel cell space, on the hydrogen generation space, on electric mobility, we have to think a little bit in a way that is commensurate with the size of the country and get the rest of the world excited. And Japan is a perfect place for a perfect partner in that space. And we've had some great successes. Why should we not try to look at creating a Suzuki, many more Suzukis with Toshiba there, with Panasonic, looking at large numbers. You know, so that's the fundamental point I want.
I noted the point that you said that there is some policy announcement that is going to come soon. Vikram, I'm coming to you. Are we getting a little ahead of ourselves by focusing only on hydrogen when it comes to green energy in India? Because solar is obviously what seems to be something that will help us over the next decade or maybe more.
So Siddharth, I think if we look at the net zero maths, it's not an either or, it's an and, very clearly.
Okay.
Right? Not only do we need renewable energy, whether it is solar or wind, in you know, a lot higher than what we do today. So if as a country today we do maybe 10, 15 gigawatts every year, that needs to be scaled up to 40 to 50 gigawatts every year. We need green hydrogen as well, not only for domestic consumption, which I agree with the colleagues that it may take India a little bit of time to ramp up the domestic consumption curve, but we can be a net exporter. For the first time, India can leapfrog to be a net exporter of energy, at least in context of green hydrogen. And then we need other products as well, right? I mean, there is a huge demand today of high quality carbon offsets, right? Which many Western companies are looking for, and India could be a supplier for that. And that is where, you know, I think the Japanese-India partnership makes sense at multiple levels, right? I think you know, again, some of this has been talked about. Japan brings capital at scale and at a very competitive price to the table. India brings execution capacity at a very different scale and a very competitive price to the table, right? Today, there are not too many countries who can boast of 15, 20 gigawatts per annum of execution capacity. That's required for renewable energy, that's required as an input for green hydrogen.
What about manufacturing capability?
Absolutely, that was my second point, that you know, most Western countries today are very, very actively thinking about delinking their supply chains from China. India could be a natural beneficiary, and India and Japan combination, where we leverage the technology of Japan and we leverage the large labor pool and conducive policies the government of India is setting up, the PLI schemes we are all aware about.
Right.
India could become a pretty significant, you know, exporter of green manufactured products, whether it is electrolyzers, whether it is solar panels, name it.
Dr. Mathur, just to come and take off from the point that you made earlier during your presentation, India's biggest and largest corporations have announced forays into renewable energy in various forms, and it's for those individual companies to really go about that. But the larger question is that when it comes to the last 3 decades, I get the sense that when it comes to our shift from thermal to others, we have held ourselves back in many ways, when even the regulatory sort of framework has raised questions in private investors' minds. Is it because, if I may use that word, of the coal lobby and our dependence on thermal that we are not able to go forward and, you know, take off from the vision that you just spoke about?
Siddharth, the organization I work with, the International Solar Alliance, was announced at the climate negotiations in Paris in December 2015. So almost exactly 7 years ago. At that point, the amount of solar electricity in the grid was less than 2%. Today, it is more than 11%. And the size of the pie has actually increased. The total amount of electricity sold is far more than what it was in 2015. This suggests that we have been very successful. Now, obviously, all the things that you said are true. But the fact remains that we are forging ahead. We are forging ahead by addressing those kinds of issues which are particularly true of developing countries. Because remember, you have to do this at prices that you and I are willing and able to pay. That's not always straightforward. Solar electricity for long years had been an electricity for the rich, no longer.